I'm Marinaro. It's a sick podcast, CF Montreal Talk. On Saturday, May 13th, CF Montreal has a date with Toronto FC. It's going to be the second time they play them this week because, of course, they played them on Tuesday, a couple of days back in the Canadian Championship in Toronto. Now MLS action resumes, and so it's a huge rivalry, we know. But we're not talking about that right now. What we're going to talk about is the 30-year anniversary of the club, because on Saturday, it's almost going to be 30 years to the day that the Montreal Impact played their first game in franchise history. As a matter of fact, their first game came on May 14, 1993. They played a game in Los Angeles. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to educate everyone and go back down memory lane as to how the Montreal Impact was born. Who better to bring in than the man who brought the team here himself? It was his idea. He placed the calls. He contacted the sponsors. Pino Azzaro joins me coming up on the podcast.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. CF Montreal Talk.
Here's the chance. They've got the goal. Absolutely incredible. Cameron Porter delivers the goal to send Montreal Impact into the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final.
The sickest CF Montreal podcast. It's gonna be sick.
He was the first general manager in Montreal Impact history in their inaugural season in 1993. He was also their general manager for the 1994 season, which resulted in a championship. 1-0 win at Claude Robillard on a free kick goal by Gene Harbour in front of about 86 or 8,700 and change. He is a very good friend of mine. I bring in Pino Azzaro. Pino, how are you?
I'm fine, Tony. Tony, just a question for you. Weren't you a flag bearer at that particular final along with my daughter and a few other people that I brought in? Weren't you part of that flag bearer pre-game festivities?
You know what, Pino, to tell you the truth, I had forgot about that. And now that
were.
you're bringing it up,
You were, Tony.
I was a flag bearer, yes.
Yes, you were.
Because
you
my
were.
only memory, Pino, of that game, besides the fact that it was a jam-packed Claude Robillard, which was an attendance of 8,600 and change, which was the announced attendance. It felt like there was about 10,000 in the place, to tell you the truth. The only thing I really remember is I remember the stadium was packed. I remember Gene Harbour scoring a goal on a free kick that the ball swerved like only the way Gene Harbour could kick it. And I remember invading the pitch the second the final whistle was blown. I do remember hugging you, Pino, and congratulating you on that championship. But thank you for bringing it up that I was indeed a flag bearer. I remember it now. Yeah.
I guarantee you that I have pictures, and I'm quite sure that were one of the flag bearers. There was a team of young athletes and female athletes. Of course, my daughter was part of it. Christina, at the time, she was 10 years old, and she was into soccer. Her cousin Liana Morano was also there, and I'm sure you were there because you were.
No, I was. It's the most incredible part of this whole story is it's incredible to think that I was so much closer to the team 30 years ago than I was 30 years later after 20 plus years in media. But I digress. Hey, listen, this is supposed to be a celebration, and so let's talk about it, Pino. How was the Montreal Impact born?
I tell you, the story always gives me, brings emotions. It was born basically from the ashes of the Montreal Supra. Let me just remind some people what was the Montreal Supra. It was the Montreal franchise of the Canadian Soccer League, the last Canadian Soccer League that was basically deemed professional. There was Montreal, there was Toronto, Winnipeg, there was Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and so on and so forth. That was the only league that actually ever in the history of Canadian soccer. And the then president, Mr. Aliaga, came to get me at the end of 1991 because he was having problems keeping the sponsors, and given the fact that I was a well-known figure in the Italian community, and a lot of the sponsors had Italian basically affinity, i.e. the Sapporo Group, our dear friend Tony Falvo, which was a marketing VP at Ultramar, but a good Italian, a good Calabrese boy. And there was Molson O'Keefe with at the time there was also Gabi Mancini involved, and
Yeah.
So there was a I added to that to those three names. I also added Bell Mobility. So Mr. Aliaga made me an offer at the time. If you remember, I was running a business, Stadio Sports,
Yep.
which is around the corner from where you live, and.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good opportunity for me to break into professional soccer in.
You actually used me for a TV commercial, by the way,
Yes,
for Stadio
yes,
Sports.
I did.
Yeah.
You were one of my models, Tony.
Yeah.
I still have those pictures.
Yeah.
And
what was the pay back then? The pay was you're going to be on television. All right, thank you. There's your pay. All right, okay.
And your followers basically will get an idea how far back you and I and your family go, Tony.
Pino, if I can, was one of the first people that my dad met when he immigrated here from Italy back in 1967. They met up probably around the soccer fields in Montreal, or maybe even more specifically in the region area of Villemard, more specifically Bar Roma, which was kind of like a meeting point for a lot of immigrants back then who had a passion for soccer. Newman Park in Villemard, yeah.
I was 16 years old, fresh from having arrived from Italy, and it was my second summer, and basically I was recruited by Monitalia. By the then Nino Di Stefano and Nino Mirabile, but because I was so young, I was riding the bench all the time, and I wanted to play. And your grandfather, Don Pepe Italiano, saw me play, and he said, "Pino, come and join Napoli." And after a lot of arguments with Nino Di Stefano to get my release to join Napoli, I finally was able to, and this is when I met your dad, because your dad was the technical director under your grandfather. Yeah, and your dad and I became best of friends, like brothers to this day. And so going back to the Supra, I accepted the offer from Mr. Aliaga, a Spanish immigrant that had done well in Florida by opening up different service stations. And his son was playing on the team, and so he decided to invest on the team, and he had big plans and dreams for his son, Frankie Jr. To one day join Real Madrid, because they were, it's a family from Spain. Fast forward to the end of the season, after I had to let go of Bobby Vosmeyer as coach, so I got on the bench, ended the season as coach of the Montreal Impact as well as GM. At the end of the season, after we got eliminated by Winnipeg in the playoffs,
I think if memory recalls, Pino Azzaro was behind the bench for Montreal, who went up against Vancouver and Bobby Lenarduzzi.
And we beat them 2-0.
2-0. There we go.
2-0. You know what? That was the highlight of my coaching, of my short coaching career. We really, I tell you, and for those who don't know,
to this day, my father says that you were playing his system.
Vancouver was loaded with national team players. 9 out of 11 players were on the national team. Wow. And I tell you, our boys, starting from Nick DeSantis, Patrick Diot, Roddy Dolescat, all the Montreal, Marco Rizzi. With the Supra, we also had Bunbury. Alex Bunbury was our center forward. Nick Albanese had a stint with the Supra. So our boys played their heart out for me.
The late Nick Albanese, by the way. Nick Albanese, may he rest in peace.
Yeah, that's right. They played their heart out, and we really took it to Vancouver, and And I tell you what, Bobby Lenarduzzi at the end of the game couldn't stop congratulating me for how well our team played.
The fantastic. So this league folded.
It did fold. It did fold when Vancouver jumped ship to the APSL, the American Professional Soccer League. Already the writing was on the wall that the CSL was on its last leg, and we had teams like Winnipeg that could not basically sustain the financial burden because the travel costs. I mean, Canada is a huge country, so the travel costs were prohibitive, and the only teams that were basically making ends meet were Toronto because they had very rich owners, and Vancouver. Our team was struggling. I mean, the players will tell you. I had to really put up arguments in defense of our players so that they could get what they deserved. I'm not going to hide the fact that some players will tell you that sometimes as compensation they received gas coupons.
Wow.
Wow. I mean, it's an inside joke, but at one time it happened. It was not a salary, but it was just part of a bonus. But nevertheless, it just goes to tell you.
With the Supra, did you bring in my other buddy Mike Moretto to work with you? Did he start with the Supra?
Yes, I did. Very good question. Yes, I did.
Yes, because Mike wants to let you know that he still did not receive some of those gas certificates. if you want to drop them off to me, I'll drop them off to him.
Mike started the season with me, and halfway through the season, I even brought in Stéphane Banfi as my director of communications because Marc Touga, which he was at the time the director of communications, decided to go back to school.
Yeah,
and through all the interviews. Stéphane Banfi, he certainly impressed me, and so I hired him and we finished the season with him as our director of communications. So fast forward to the end of
Pino, I brought up Mike because he is a mutual friend of ours, but just to think today, the career that Mike has had, 30 years of Montreal Impact history, and for 30 years he's worked in soccer. I don't know how many were with the Impact, but let me just put it this way. Half of his professional career was a year and a half with the Supra. And then the other half, and then with the Impact, of course, and now with the Canadians men's with Canada Soccer, basically, right. And their entire program. And he's the lead equipment manager, head equipment manager with all the teams, boys and girls under his responsibility, of course.
And thanks to basically his hard work and believing in what he was doing, and all the merit goes to Mike because he really made the best of all his opportunities, and hats off to Mike.
I believe he left a pretty good job to go and work for you and join you in that venture because he was passionate about it. He was working for Alcan.
He was working for Alcan, exactly.
Yeah.
And he even came, he doubled up and even gave me a hand at the store a few times.
Wow.
Yeah, Mike and I were very, very close all the time, and we did enjoy some very, very, very good moments while I was with the Impact. It was a short stint. In any case, moving forward at the end of the season of the Supra, when Vancouver jumped ship, the writing was on the wall that the CSL could not sustain another season without the flagship franchise, which was Vancouver. So the then president Aliaga, who was also the interim president of the Canadian Soccer League, because the then president had to resign, Mr. Di Bartolomeo from Hamilton. He had to resign because of the finances weren't there to pay the commissioner, basically. So our Mr. Aliaga was acting commissioner as well as president of the Supra and owner.
Wow.
At the end of the season, when it was obviously known that the CSL was going to fold, it was just a matter of time or months, basically. He came to me and he asked me, he says, "Look, Pino, why don't you inquire to see what what are the requirements or minimum standards for us to join the APSL like Vancouver did. So I prepared a business plan, which I presented to Bill Sage, the then commissioner of the American Professional Soccer League. And when I came back with the numbers, Mr. Aliaga said, "Oh, there's no way personally I can afford that. So I guess you should tell Mr. Sage that Montreal is not in." And obviously, I had no choice but to do that. A couple of weeks go by, Mr. Sage calls me back. He says, "Pino, you put together such a great business plan. Why don't you see if there's a backer in Montreal that could finance the team and secure professional soccer in Montreal?" I said, "Look, Bill, I never promise anything. That I said, look, I'll do my best. I don't promise anything, but I'll certainly try." And the first call I made was to one of our major sponsors at the time, which was Saputo. So I called up Joey, and I said, "Joey, I need to meet you for lunch." And we did. I presented him the project. I showed him the numbers. I showed him the opportunity. And again, you got to keep in mind, Tony, that the business plan was all built on the future of soccer in North America, with the coming of the World Cup in 1994. And he really, I could see it in his eyes that he was very, very enthused with the project. And he said to me, he says, "Pino, give me a couple of weeks. Let me present this to my dad, and I'll get back to you." Sure enough, a couple of weeks go by, and I get a phone call from Joey. He says, "Pino, are you ready to make a presentation to my father?" Now, you know me, Joey, I've been a professional salesman all my life. And an opportunity like that, I wasn't going to let it slide. So I prepared myself the best I could. I went in.
You gave the presentation of your life, basically.
The meeting was held in Lino Saputo's office, in the presence of Joey, his brother Lino Jr., Camilo Lizio, which was Mr. Saputo's right-hand person, and I made the sale of my life. But I wasn't given the green light that particular night. They showed a lot of interest. They asked all the questions they needed to ask, and I gave them all the answers to all the questions. And they said they would get back to me. A few weeks go by again, and now we're towards the end of November, I think.
Did you have a deadline? Was there a deadline
No, there was no deadline per se. No, so Camilo calls me and he says, "Pino, we still need a few bits and pieces of information. Are you prepared to come back and answer a few more questions?" And he gave me the questions or the information they were looking for, which I did find. I went back and again I presented whatever they needed to know. And at the end of the evening, Mr. Saputo, Lino Senior, shook my hand. He says, "Pino, I'm not going to give you an answer tonight because our company is still private. It was not public at the time. They are not joined the. They were not basically in the financial markets yet. It was not a public company like they are today." He says, "I arranged a meeting with the family. I'm going to run it by the family, and Joey will get back to you tomorrow with an answer." But I know right there and then I left convinced that it was a go. And sure enough, the next day, Joey called me and he said, "Pino, we're in, and you're our general manager." And that's how the impact came about. The time to organize the press conference, which was
it's a beautiful story.
Probably one of the best press conferences ever held in Montreal. It was at the Sheraton Center. All the top journalists, the top, I tell you that nobody was missing.
Hold on a second. Let's bring up a picture, if we can, of the press conference. I think we have one. There you have it. Hey, look at that, Pino. It was a packed house. And I find this incredible, Pino, in that 30 years later, if you have a press conference today, if the team has a press conference today, they're not going to get a turnout like that. They're just not. I mean, there was such a buzz and such an excitement, and there still is today. Don't get me wrong, but all I'm trying to state, it was so very impressive, the turnout that was there. I think I got a picture of you. There you go. Okay.
That's
And
taken in the Lino in Saputo's headquarters boardroom.
okay.
That day, it was a shoot
Yeah.
day for myself, Joy, and Camilo, and we took individual pictures, and then I grouped the three of us. And that picture, the three of us made the front cover of one of the local magazines. I don't remember the name
Okay,
now.
and we'll get to more pictures a little bit later on. Okay, so that press conference there, once again, where was it?
It was at the Sheraton Center. That was the first press conference with the then mayor Jean Doré, bless his soul.
Yeah.
Lino Saputo, Joy, and Bill Sage, the commissioner, and myself were on stage.
All right.
Of course, I chaired the press conference as the general manager, and that was the official. I would say.
Just announcing that Montreal was going to enter the APSL, basically.
Correct.
There was no name at that point. There was no logo. There was no coach. There was no nothing. It was just
no name. My
we're
first
here to
business card,
announce.
my first business card, which I still have, it was Pino Azaro, general manager, APSL franchise, Montreal.
Wow. Wow.
That was
Isn't
the
something?
first. And then they gave me an office inside the sales office of the Saputo marketing department.
Yeah.
I shared the office with all the salespeople from the cheese company, and I had my desk, and I started going to work, trying to tie all the loose ends. I mean, I basically had a clean slate, Tony, and I had to not only find the name, which was done by committee, and the family was involved. That was another funny story that I would love to tell one day.
You can't tell it now?
Well, yeah, basically.
Go for it. Listen, I have nowhere to go.
You have nowhere to go. Okay. Well, after basically we hired the coach and so on and so forth, we had to come up with a name.
Okay. Well, before
actually, I'm sorry. No, the name was before the hiring of the coach.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I apologize. So here we are having meetings in the same boardroom that you saw the picture of me, in the presence of Nadia Saputo, her mother Mirella, Camilo, Joy, Nadia's ex-husband, and a few other people. And we all had ideas, and we kept coming up with names. And I have to be honest, the impact was not, because I'm a very traditional soccer person. So I had names that were more soccer, I would say, than the impact ever was. But then, when we could not agree after 3 or 4 meetings that we had, finally,
what were some of the names that were on the table or thrown out there?
I don't remember. One of them was Dynamo. Of course, there's a Dynamo of Zagreb and Dynamo of Kiev. There was Inter, because Montreal is an international city, very, very cosmopolitan. These are maybe two of the names that we kicked around.
So Dynamo was one and Inter was another. Okay.
Yes. And again, you're testing my memory now, Tony, but for sure, yes. And then at the end, we settled on the impact. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, you know what, it makes sense, because this team, it will definitely make an impact soccer-wise to not only the city of Montreal, but also the province of Quebec.
Do you remember who brought that name to the table?
Sorry?
Do you remember everyone in the meeting who brought that name to the table?
I don't remember, Tony.
Okay.
I really don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember.
It's a good name.
But it was very, very, very important that we stuck with the colors of the Quebec flag. So you saw the blue, the white, and we throw in a little bit of black, just to, because black always represented in sports, ruggedness and determination, and so we wanted a team that was that portrayed toughness. Okay,
I think we have the first Montreal Impact logo, if we can bring it up. That was the media guide, Pino, 1993 media guide, and there's the logo right there.
Right there. That's
the blue, the white, and the black.
So I worked on the logo with the graphic artist and a company as well. We had different projects, different I would say samples that came up, but finally myself and Joy and unanimously agreed on that particular logo because it was something that we all liked and agreed upon. Then once the name, then we had to go get a coach, and
Eddie Firmani. How did that come about?
Well, it came about. I have to laugh because I was on the hunt for a coach, and I had proposed Gordon Hill to be our first coach. To be very honest, former Manic player,
former Montreal Manic number 11.
Yeah. Exactly.
Former Manchester United.
And former national English national team player.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in Florida scouting, and I meet with Gordon. We agreed on everything. He was ready to come. He was ready to walk to Montreal to take that position. When I get back to Montreal, I find out that Eddie Firmani, who had just been released from one of the Iraqi prisons, because he had been taken prisoner while he was in Kuwait as coaching, and when Kuwait was invaded by the Iraqis in the Gulf War, he was taken prisoner, and he was a prisoner for a number of months until. And this is straight from Eddie's mouth. He befriended the sports minister of Iraq, which had happened to be the son of the then dictator Saddam Hussein. And because he had an Italian passport, as well as he was born in South Africa, grew up in England from a very young age. His family emigrated from South Africa to England, played professionally in England, and then he was recruited by Inter Milan.
Yeah,
and he had a long career in Italy. And
he played for Sampdoria too, if memory serves me well.
Exactly, he played for Milan, Inter Milan, and Sampdoria. And while he spent all that time in Italy, he became an Italian citizen as well. So he had dual citizenship. And so, thanks to his Italian passport, he was released. Now, I don't know how we got the news that Montreal was joining the APSL.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, given the relationship he had with Mr. Lino Saputo and the Saputo family, he basically called them and he offered his services. So when I came back from Florida to present the candidacy of my first choice,
Gordon Hill,
I was told, well, Pino, there's a situation with Eddie, and I knew Eddie. I knew him as a gentleman.
Yeah.
I knew when you coached the Cosmos. I knew that I had followed him as a player, even though he was young at the time, and he was a big name.
Yeah.
Well, so I wasn't sure that he was up to the task coaching wise. And we'll find out later his demise as our coach, unfortunately. But I said, you know what? He's a big name. He certainly will attract a lot of media attention, and that's what we need as a year. As we kick off our first season.
Mm-hmm.
And I then basically I accepted the fact that he was available, and that. They had worked out a deal that involved not only coaching the Impact, but also there was a project that Eddie was a project that was close to his heart, along with a former player from Hamilton. I forget the person's name now. Frank something. It was the captain of the Hamilton Steelers. They wanted to put up a dome complex in Montreal somewhere, and that was part of the deal that he had made with the Saputo family or the Saputo group, besides coaching, and so that's how he became our coach. And we had another press conference at Chateau Vaudreuil, where we presented Eddie as our coach. We presented the official team of a sweater of the team, I should say, and two of the players that I was able to sign, because now I believe it's the month of February or March, and so that's how Eddie got to be our coach. And then we had to plan our first not just preseason, but the training, the preseason training. And thanks to my contacts in Italy, and so Robotti, former player of Fiorentina, who had introduced me to Dr. Fini, who was the director of the Coverciano Center, which is the national training center for the Italian national team, which is on the outskirts of Florence. And I had, every time I used to go to Italy, I would, with Enzo Robotti, would visit Coverciano and spend countless of hours there, just reminiscing the history of the national team with Dr. Fini and so on and so forth. So, I'm
glad you guys ended up hiring Eddie Fermani in the end, even though he didn't last very long as head coach, Pino, because he was living in our buddy Mike Moretto's bachelor at the time, which is right across the street from our house. And Eddie didn't have much family here, so he would come over to my place all the time and have breakfast. So it led to some great soccer conversations.
I remember that, and he had quite a few suppers at my place as well, because, as you know, I still live in LaSalle. So
hey, think about it. Back then, I was having breakfast with the head coach of the Montreal Impact. I was having lunch with the equipment manager of the Montreal Impact. And I was having supper with the general manager of the Montreal Impact.
Tony, and let's not forget all the times that you called my Telitalia when I was on Teleset.
You're right about that. Pino Azaro is a big reason why I actually ended up in the media, but we'll tell that story another day. But
you nailed all the quizzes.
Oh man, it was so fun to be connected with everyone back then, and once again, 30 years later.
Right. So anyway, we took the team to Coverciano. Coverciano. We took the team to Montecatini as our first training camp, and I set it all up. And I went down only for the second week. The first week, I let the team started training, and then when it came time to do the preseason games with some of the local teams, myself, Joey, and Francis Millien, and I forget if there was another person with us. Went down to Montecatini, and Mike will tell you stories about that training camp.
Yeah,
and I was able to set up a training session at Coverciano, and the players, I tell you, to this day, we arrived as the national team was leaving for Portugal for World Cup qualifier. Now this is the spring of 1993, and the World Cup again was in '94 in USA.
Prior to leaving, though, of course, you had the press conference to introduce the new coach. I just want to bring up a picture, if I can, with head coach Eddie Fermani. We have a couple of pictures. One of Eddie by himself. There you go, with the cap. There you go. And here's a picture with there you go, you, Mr. Saputo, his son Joey, and of course Coach Eddie Fermani.
Eddie Fermani. Wow, that's a nice picture. I don't even have that picture.
Hold on a second. Do you have this?
Yes, I do.
You have that,
eh? Yeah, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Patrice Ferry. Patrice Ferry on the cover. Programme Officiel, Volume 1, Number 2, June 1993. Patrice Ferry de Lyon à Montréal pour l'aventure. And so we open it up.
I'll never forget. I'll never forget.
Here's the roster. Let's see if we can actually show the roster.
Patrice showed up in Montecatini with his dad, driving a BMW, and he was not. He had not signed. He was nowhere in our plans, and I had to convince Eddie to give him a serious look, because I said I remember telling Eddie that this guy has all the credentials. He speaks French. We need speaking professionals, because I mean, all we have is local players at the moment, and so we need somebody that will basically appease to the French media.
Yeah.
And finally, he listened to me, and the rest is history, because when the team left Italy to come back to Montreal, I finally ended up signing Patrice, which was a former Ligue 1 first division player in France.
And here's our friend Marco Rizzi, who was also on that team. He's living in Ohio nowadays.
Sporting a huge beard.
Yeah, nice article on him. And this is the entire roster, of course. Let me actually put on my I showed it before, but for those who are actually we're going to be listening to the podcast, Pat Harrington in goal, Rudy Doliscat and Patrice Ferry, Nick DeSantis, Dino Lopez, Marco Rizzi, who was the captain, Nick Dasovic, Nicola Zanone, Lloyd Barker, Patrick Diot, Adel Barry, Cameron Walker, Robbie Gasparini, Jason Divos, Pierre-Richard Thomas, the late Pierre-Richard Thomas, Otman Ibrir, Abdel Saran, Andre Balat, Mauro Biello, Jamel Larabi, and Mustafa Saran. Did Mustafa play for Corfinium? Was that him?
No, I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Right, okay.
No, I there were a few players that played in the CSL, like for example, Nick DeSantis played in Hamilton.
Yeah,
I remember that. Patrick Diot played in Ottawa, that's the first official team picture. Yes, at Claude Robillard, and I'm sitting next to Lino Jr.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Yes, I was proud that year to have signed as an 18-year-old Jason DeVos. He lived in London, Ontario. I negotiated the contract with his family, and I knew that Jason had a great future in soccer.
Yeah,
because,
hey,
I had seen clips of him, and sure enough,
look at our buddy Mike Moreno. Look at him,
standing next to Nick Dasovic.
He looks like a Hollywood actor there. And you know what? Here's a picture I noticed too. This is Physiotina Janakis, who works on my boys. She's at Kinetex now.
Yes,
on Mozart in Little Italy.
Correct.
Wow, so many familiar faces. It's nice to see this. And you talked about Patrice Ferry. There's the article on Patrice Ferry. Who, by the way,
he became our captain soon after.
He was all class. He was an excellent player. He was an excellent player.
A left foot. I tell you, like very few players I saw in his position. And no, we had a good team. And unfortunately, that first season we did not make the playoffs.
Yeah, you lost the first game, right? You lost the first game in Los Angeles.
Correct, but we won the first game at home.
And then you won the first game at home versus the Rowdies, I think.
I believe so. Tony, you're testing my memory. I'm getting old.
Yeah, no, you're.
All my impact.
You lost the first game in Los Angeles versus the Salsa. All right, and you won the first game at home versus Tampa. You won that game.
Correct. It was Tampa Rowdies.
It was the Tampa Bay Rowdies. You won by a score of 4-2.
Correct. And I believe Zanone scored in that particular game. Nicola Zanone, that an import like Patrice Ferry.
How did you get him? How did you get Nicola Zanone?
Interesting question. Nicola Zanone, I had no idea he was available. He's a former Lanerossi Vicenza player. He played along Paolo Rossi. In fact, they were both coming out of the Juventus farm system. They both ended up at playing for Vicenza when Vicenza was in B division, and they scored so many goals. I think they still own that record. They were considered the I gemelli del goal, the twins, the scoring twins.
Yeah.
And of course, Paolo Rossi then went back to play for Juventus, and Zanone became a journeyman. But his best years were with Sampdoria, with the then again, bless his soul, President Mantovani, who, thanks to Zanone, I had a chance to meet in his office in Genova on a particular trip to Italy while I was the GM of the Impact.
Yeah.
And there was a reporter from Tutto Sport from Torino.
Yeah.
That I had encountered while I was in Italy in my travels, and him and I stayed in touch. And one day he calls me up. He said, "I have a player for you if you're interested. He's a striker. He's at the end of his career, by the name of Nicola Zanone." So sure enough, I researched his background. And I saw a few clips, and I thought, hey, this guy could certainly help us. And I reached out to him, and we hit it off right away. I got the okay from Joey and Camilo on an offer, and sure enough, he accepted. And Mike,
in general, how much were players paid back then? Remember?
Anywhere between, the
24-game season, by the way. There were 7 teams in the championship in 1993. The Montreal Impact in their expansion season finished 7th, right? Do you remember how many points you finished with? 90 points. Back then, they gave 6 points for a win in regulation.
Oh yeah, we had. Listen, we had rules. The shootout. I don't know if you remember that.
There was a shootout, of course. So in general, how much were players paid on average?
Look, basically juniors, because of the budget I had to work with.
Yeah.
The juniors, like I signed Mauro Biello and the other kid that you mentioned. I forget his name. Gasparini.
Yeah. Who was a huge prospect back in the day, but unfortunately, I believe it was an injury. I'm not sure if it was a back injury, but it was an injury that did him in, unfortunately. But a huge talent.
They were basically on bonuses and some expenses paid, and the bonuses were structured. You get dressed. B, you enter the game. C, you start a game, and those were the criteria that I had to basically follow. The former players of the CSL, like the Nick DeSantis and the Patrick Diot, Pat Harrington, all the players that basically from the CSL ended up in the APSL with the Impact, they were all being paid around $15,000 to $20,000 at the time, which was I would say maybe double what they were making as players under in the CSL. So, and of course the imports were paid a lot more than that, and also there were expense factors. And Mike will tell you he was busy finding apartments for the players that came from out of town.
Mike Moreno, the best friend of the players back then. And 30 years later, still the best friend of all the players that he deals with.
The most popular guy.
The most popular guy.
Not only in the dressing room, but the most popular guy. He was Mr. Congeniality.
Would go pick them up at the airport, would get apartments for them, would make sure that the fridge was full, would run their errands, do some groceries, cater to all their needs. And that's why still today we love him, and he's a very good friend of ours. So, Pino, that was the inaugural season. You talked about how the Montreal Impact was born. And of course, the following season in year 2, the team went on to win the championship. Valerio Gazzola was your coach. And that was your final year with the Montreal Impact, and you decided to move on. But that's another story for another day, because we'll talk. That'll be 30 years next year since that championship. In 2024, it'll be 30 years since the 94 championship. But of course, the CF Montreal will be celebrating this 30-year anniversary at Stade Saputo on Saturday night when they host Toronto FC. Will you be there, Pino?
No.
I don't want to get too personal, but we're friends. Were you invited to the game, or?
I have to be very honest. I found out in the news, and you confirmed it tonight in your phone call. Tony, what can I say? No, I haven't been invited. Would I be going if I was invited? Obviously. I mean, I've always, said that the Impact is tattooed on my heart, even though I don't have any tattoos on my body. But there's nothing for me to add, Tony. I don't know the reasons.
Yeah. Well, listen.
For not having thought of me, or I have to say, Tony, in all honesty, I have moved on. To me, the Impact is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience. That I will cherish until the day I'm on this earth. And nothing will ever take that away from me. I knew it was going to be a short stint for me as a general manager. I was proud the role that I played in building the team from scratch. And I know you don't want to go into 94, but one of the most proud moments of my tenure as a general manager of the Impact is when I was able to finally sign Gene Harbour. Through thick and thin, the most complicated, complex negotiations with Noel Okuruko, for those who know him. At the time, he was involved in local soccer as well, but he became his representative at the table. And we're in his office on Sherbrooke Street, and Gene Harbour had just arrived, and I thought we had a deal, but then the deal that we had made obviously wasn't good enough anymore. They kept asking for more and more, and I kept running back to the phone, with Joey and Joey, we need this guy. We got to do whatever it takes to sign this guy. And Joey, I tell you, I have to say, he supported me 200% because he trusted me.
Happy to hear it.
I was able to sign him. And as soon as I left that office, I rushed over at the time it was the Ramada Inn, on Guy and René Lévesque. Today is Hotel Espresso. Eddie was waiting for me for lunch, and I broke the news that we had signed Gene Harbour, who at the time, by the way, for those who don't know, was the USA the national team striker.
Wow.
And
I don't know if you know this, by the way, whose son right now is a terrific athlete, eh?
You told me
he's in track and field. He's a multi-sport athlete, as a matter of fact. I believe he plays another sport too. But anyway, he's absolutely Pino Azzaro. I've never had a CF Montreal podcast, at least I don't think so, that has gone over 45 minutes up until now. But I did it because it was worth it. There's a beautiful story to tell. You told it very eloquently. And on behalf of all Montrealers and all fans of the Montreal Impact, Pino, thank you for everything that you did for soccer in this city and helping bring the Montreal Impact to us.
It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story, Tony, and I'm glad you bring it up from time to time because it needs to be brought up and it deserves space in the sports spectrum of Montreal. Because I mean it was not the MLS at the time. It was the APSL, which was the top tier at the time in North America. So when we won the season in 1994, it was like we won the MLS championship because we were top dogs. And it was only after the World Cup of 1994 that the MLS actually was supposed to start in 95, but then they delayed it by 1 year, and it actually kicked off in 1996. So
thank you for your business plan. Thank you for your presentation. And thank you to the Saputo family and the Saputo group, obviously, for saying, you know what, we're in.
And I will always be grateful to Mr. Lino Saputo, Joey, and the rest of the family for the trust that they have always had in me. And to this day, I have to say that I have nothing but good things and nothing but good memories, and I will do it all over again.
Thank you, Pino Azaro. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Tony, for the opportunity.
All right, there you have it. It's a Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. Marinaro, you can follow us on Twitter, subscribe. It's absolutely free, and follow our Twitter handle at SickPod, CFMTL. Ciao for now.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.